Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from Newslaundry.
This is a Newslaundry podcast and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज़ लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. We are back with another episode of Hafta, which we will not give up on, even though today we have the media rumble kicking off. Those of you who have been seeing our notifications, this is the 4th edition of the media rumble, and this time it's digital. Those of you who've attended the last few, I'm sure would miss it. I know I miss the hustle and bustle where we have last year we had over 100 speakers, but this year it's online. Hopefully we will get back as a physical event where we can discuss technology, journalism, the technology related to journalism, business models, policy, etc. But we are here recording the Hafta on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. And while Manisha is busy with the media rumble and Mehraj is away, on the panel today we have Raman Kirpal. Hi, sir.
Hi.
Revati Laul. Hi, Revati.
Hi.
And Abantika Ghosh.
Hi.
So I shall just introduce our two guest panelists today. Abantika is a print journalist. She's been working as a journalist for 17 years and among the biggest English dailies, including the Times of India and the Indian Express. She's right now at ThePrint, which is a digital platform, and she's interested in health, policy, public health, and the cross-section of health and politics. Meanwhile, Revati has worked with a bunch of people, including me. Hi, Rev.
Hi.
And she has written The Anatomy of Hate. It's a book, very interesting book, where she kind of dissects the psychology of those who participate in the riots. Right now, she lives and works in Shamli in Western UP. She set up a rights-based NGO program called Kalandar. And you're still writing and you haven't abandoned journalism altogether, Revati?
Not at all. The two segue into each other.
Okay, great. Before I get into a discussion with our wonderful panelists, here are the headlines which I shall be announcing today. Hundreds of key Indian bureaucrats and officials part of a Chinese surveillance data, apart from tens of thousands of other Indians, including some journalists and apparently even a ZTV editor, Mr. What's his name? Sudhir Chaudhary was part of that. I really don't know how significant or important this is. If Indian Express put it on its front page, I'm guessing it is quite important, but I have heard others say that this kind of data mining is not a big deal. Then 17,000 page charge sheet filed against 15 for the Delhi riots conspiracy. Umar Khalid has been arrested under the UAPA, which is an anti-terror law. We shall discuss this in some detail. Then our values don't recognize same-sex marriage, the central government tells us, Delhi High Court. This came up during a conversation where a bench comprising Justice D.N. Patel and Justice Deepak Jalan replied that they need to examine the petition with an open mind, and the petition is about same-sex marriage. So I'm wondering how many of you guys listening to this would actually think it is part of our cultural milieu and will be acceptable. Then the police allegedly beat up 2 photojournalists in Pulwama for taking pictures during a gunfight. The attack on journalism continues all over the country, especially so in the former state of Jammu and Kashmir. Then India and China fired 100-200 warning shots at Pangong in early September. This has come out recently in several reports. And this apparently is what led to situation being diffused and now the talks that are on. But shots were fired. Purpose is to vilify Muslims. The Supreme Court restrained Sudarshan TV from telecasting the UPSC Jihad show. In case you're wondering what is this UPSC Jihad show, we shall discuss this with the panel in some detail. Tata's win the contract to build the new parliament building for 861.9 crores at a time when our healthcare infrastructure is crumbling. Prime Minister Modi's vanity project of redoing Lutyens is starting off in spite of the many reports and, voices of criticism. Nothing can stop that juggernaut. So you will have an all-new Lutyens. I guess we'll call it Modi's Delhi. Then ex-Facebook employee claims to working towards taking down vast network, working to influence the 2020 Delhi election. This is a report in the Huffington Post where this ex-Facebook employee has spoken about several cases, I think almost 10 cases of elections around the world in different countries and how Facebook influenced those elections and did not act in very ethical ways. Then the Pakistan NSA displays a map of Jammu and Kashmir as part of Pakistan. This happened at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting on Tuesday. And of course, it was a virtual meeting, but the Pakistan representative had a map with J&K and our NSA Doval walked out of that meeting. Then the government says it has no data of migrant workers' deaths, loss of jobs. later clarifies after backlash that, oh no, we do have some kind of data. I mean, you must see what's happening in Parliament. In fact, I highly recommend our colleague Meghnad's. He's done one open session on YouTube already on what to expect from Parliament. He will be doing a few closed sessions, which will be for subscribers only. So do subscribe to Newslaundry and be part of those sessions. You will find them most interesting and entertaining, just like Meghnad can make it, but on a subject that is very important and relevant to you. And the show is called Sansad Watch. So the first episode of Sansad Watch was available to all. I think it's still up on our website. You can check it out on our YouTube channel. But all further Sansad Watches, at least most of them, will be for subscribers only. Then the Rajya Sabha is to hold its first debate on COVID-19. Let's see how that goes. The Serum Institute's Adar Poonawala says that there won't be enough COVID-19 vaccines till 2024 for everybody around the world. Or he said around India, but he's basically echoing what certain doctors and healthcare professionals overseas have said, that just because it comes out doesn't mean everyone's going to get it. It'll take till 2024 for everyone in the world to get it. And that is because of cold chain supply. It has to be kept at very low temperatures. So, I mean, people in metros, I guess it'll be easily accessible to, but people who are living in far-flung areas may not get it, within the year of it. But let's see, that may change. Then Russia says it'll sell Sputnik 5 vaccine to Dr. Reddy's labs, who is going to carry out tests along with them. Then the Babri Masjid demolition verdict will be out on September 30th. Former Deputy Prime Minister Advani and others accused have been asked to appear in court. I wonder what will happen there. Then a 16-member committee has been formed to study ancient Indian culture. This is an article that I highly recommend you read. The government has formed an expert committee for conducting a study on the origin and evolution of Indian culture dating back around 12,000 years. So this should be an interesting study. Now let's get into discussions with our wonderful panel. But first, I have a few announcements. As you know, Haftas are going to be free until we launch the new website. And our new website's test version is done, and the test version will keep getting tweaked. I think a couple of hundred of you subscribers will be getting links because you want to get your feedback on the test, what you think, what we can change and improve. And it is going to be an ongoing project. It will not, all the features that will be recommended won't be, changed together. So we really want to have this interactive, feedback session with all of you, so that before we launch, we can at least tweak some of the important things that all of you kind of suggest to us. And then going forward, all other suggestions will be taken in, and we will keep improving the website. And once we feel the website is at an optimum kind of design and functionality, then that same website design and functionality will be replicated in the app, which will probably come 3 months or so after the website has been launched and approved by all of you. So thank you, subscribers, those of you who are going to be giving us recommendations. Some of you who have already got the links, thank you for your inputs. Some of you will be getting links over the next week. I look forward to your inputs and what we can do to improve the experience. And then, of course, the Hafta will be pulled back behind the paywall, and you'll have to pay for it like we used to in the good old days. Many of you have continued to pay Newslaundry and subscribe and contribute to independent media, even though many of our usually paywalled content is available for free. Thank you for that. That means you believe in the spirit of funding journalism and not necessarily as a transaction that we pay you, so you give us podcasts. But for those of you who still look at it as a transaction, that I have to give you something which is only exclusive to you and that you will pay for, the Hafta and some of our other content will be behind the paywall once the new website is up. But don't stop subscribing just because it's free. Recommend 5 people in your social circle, your family, your friends, to listen to Hafta, to check out newslaundry.com, and to pay to keep news free. So go to newslaundry.com, click on the top right-hand corner, and support independent media and journalism. And trust me, it has never been as important as it is now, not in my lifetime at least. Moving into our wonderful guests. I'd like to start first with, the health-related issues. Abantika, I read this morning in the newspaper. One is, of course, there was a report a couple of days ago that in May, by that extrapolation logic of testing people with antibodies, there were about 6.4 million people with the COVID virus back in May. And today's front page in the Times of India says that 2 out of 3 people in Delhi have antibodies. That means 66% of us here have been infected. Is that a fair assumption, do you think?
Actually, I think the figure would be 33%. That's the Indian Express, if I remember the number correctly. The 66 is actually, just a second, I have it in front of me.
Yeah, just check. Is it 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3? I thought it's...
So because it says that nearly 33% of Delhiites have, in all likelihood, developed COVID-19 antibodies.
Okay.
66% would actually have been a figure I would have been happy about.
Okay. Okay.
So 33% not so happy. So that's something we were discussing yesterday, that first you want cases not to go up, and then every time a sero survey comes, you're like, oh, just this many. So
Right.
it's a sort of we're caught in this very strange situation where, because we don't have anything else, we are essentially looking at this as some kind of insurance.
Right. But yeah, you're right. I just saw it says 1 out of 3.
Yeah.
And in July, the headline said 1 out of 4 in Delhi. But I mean, just what does this really mean? Does that mean that it's safer to go about work the way, lockdowns have been opened? Is it not safer? And also, could you weigh in on the other headline in the paper on this Russian vaccine, that 100 million vials of which we have pre-booked or whatever it is? हमने advance booking कर ली है.
Right. So first, on the sero survey, see, a couple of days back when Dr. Harshvardhan spoke on COVID in Parliament, he had mentioned that 92% of Indian patients have had a mild disease. Now, here's the issue. And on Tuesday, Dr. Balram Bhargav, who's the Secretary, Department of Health Research, he said that yes, reinfections are possible. We are getting reports, but both times it's been mild. So that basically means that this kind of assurance that we are looking for from the sero survey, that okay, 33% people are safe, is kind of iffy, because then we don't know how long these people will have antibodies. So that's one thing. Secondly, when Dr. Harshvardhan says 92% people have had mild disease, that basically means if there is a link between having a mild disease and getting infected again, as Dr. Balram Bhargav was seen to suggest this Tuesday at the COVID briefing, then again, that's not so good. That said, however, I think one of the things that we are looking at in this also, and this is something the government is not willing to admit, is that we have actually missed this many infections. In May, we had 86,000 cases. And at that point of time, if you had 64 lakh infections, when we asked, it was the question was basically sort of deflected. But it is a fact that had you, by some miracle, been able to test these 64 lakh people in May, you would have had those many people test positive, right? You missed them.
So that means the claims that we have managed to control it then would actually not be accurate at all.
No, and also, if you have a projection to support your claim that lockdown saved lives, then just to test how good those projections are, why don't you tell us now what is going to be the size of the pandemic 3 months from now? That's a fair test.
Right.
Right. If you're applying it in hindsight and saying we saved 29 lakh cases or whatever, then you tell us that in 3 months we'll be at X lakh or X crore, whatever it is. And that will test your hypothesis that this projection works. It's very simple. You're not giving us those figures, but you're sort of cherry picking. There are also projections which actually gave these kinds of figures for today. So today we are at 51 lakh. There are projections which gave 51 lakh. What did you do to prevent that?
So, Revati, you've been in, the rural heartland as opposed to urban areas for a month. When in the first lockdown, I had to drive to get books for my niece to her school, which was in Rohtak. So as I drove, from Delhi to Rohtak, all the villages on the way, there was no social distancing. No one was wearing masks. Everyone was hanging out. But at the same time, some of our colleagues in office who had gone back to their villages, our logistics and the gentleman who drives us around, they said that in their villages, there are no cases. Everyone's chilling out. It's worse here in their jhuggies and in their bastis. What do you see around? Is there an alarm? Is there a panic? And are there cases or people chilling?
It's very strange because I now wear two hats as someone who heads an NGO and as someone who also is a journalist. And the journalist in me is aware of all the stories and all the conversations around coronavirus. But when I'm situated in Western UP, and we came in May and June to actually administer 2 rounds of COVID relief because people here were starving. And then we set up at the end of July, early August. And ever since then, every time someone talks about COVID, I have to remind myself that there is actually a pandemic. Because in Shamli, in Western Uttar Pradesh, where I'm currently located, there is just like everybody, including the police, who's just making arrests of people, in order to collect money, and sometimes the allegations are that there are bribes obviously happening under the table. But apart from chalaning people, the cops themselves are not wearing masks. And, there's another side to this story, which is actually more than just farcical. It's actually quite telling of the COVID story as a whole, the politics of COVID and also the spread of the disease, which is that when people are living in, 6 or 7 people to a room, it's very, the word social distancing doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Also, if you then, as someone who is working with such people, is insisting that because you are present in their midst, that they should suddenly wear masks, it becomes like a costume. And it becomes like a class and caste divide. Because you're telling them, please adhere to my norms, because otherwise I don't feel safe. But actually, just being in the vicinity of 6 or 7 people in a room is subjecting you to as much infection as them in any case. As far as statistics goes, there is, UP doesn't appear on the top 10 radar, for instance, of the top 10 states in the country, hasn't appeared on that radar for the last 3 or 4 months. And except for at the beginning when, the whole Markaz story was spun by the government and by its allies and made out as if Muslims were the super spreader. So that was used to trace people who would come to Shamli, to Agra, to Meerut from these areas and had supposedly spread the virus as the super spreader story. After that, there's been no talk of UP in the top 10 or even cities in Uttar Pradesh or districts in Uttar Pradesh as being on the top 10. And there's a reason for this. A cop told me this when I was doing the story on police reform some years ago. He said, in cases where you find crime statistics high is where people are recording data. And those are usually places that are safer. So he said, if you want to know as a woman whether you should feel safe or unsafe in an area, just go by your gut. If you feel safe in an area, that means that it is likely to be safe. Statistics should almost be read in reverse. So if I was to apply that here, and it makes sense to apply that here, at least to where I am at in Uttar Pradesh, then the fact that the statistics have more or less been static and absent does not tell me at all whether people are infected or not infected. Most people here are too poor to go and get tested. I had a fever 2-3 weeks ago and I went to the district collection center to have myself tested. The rapid test, they say, we will only tell you the results verbally. We will not write it down at the chief medical officer's office. So I said, why? They said, no, we'll just tell you verbally. And then the actual test is sent, the sample is sent to Meerut, which is 2.5 hours away. Because there is no, testing center in Shamli. And across Uttar Pradesh, which is one of the most densely populated states in the country, there are very few testing centers. So people are having to take vials in thermocol boxes, which are not refrigerated. So how are they being carried there? What is the efficacy of the sample that's being taken? Why are the rapid tests not being recorded on paper and being told to you verbally? These are all questions we don't have answers to.
Right. Raman, so you want to comment on this?
Yeah, no, in fact, there is an incident. In Noida, there is a Sector 82, there is a colony called Defense Quarters. So last week, these authorities, some people from the authorities, they came and they conducted this RT-PCR test, of all these people. So a friend of mine stays there. So he also got it done. But his result did not come. So he just went to the hospital to collect that, his result. And he said that they didn't even look at. I said, this is my number. So they didn't even look at it. They just gave him the negative report. So, and this guy was interested in his report, not so much for the positivity or negativity. He was interested because he was going to the hills.
He wanted that.
He wanted that thing, and he also wanted the date that they had written on that of yesterday. I mean,
right.
But the
so
test
that it's
happened,
48 hours.
So in UP, there's I think
there's no sense to any of it.
There's no sense.
It's just random.
Just to add to that one thing, UP actually is among the highest testing states in the country. I was just looking at the data. Yesterday, they did 154,000 tests. And you know how many cases they reported? 6,229, which is ridiculously low.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's way low positivity
And my
rates,
friend
right?
also told that there are many people, there were agents over there. So if you pay 500, you will get the
The
report.
report to go to the hills.
In case,
In case those of you who are not from the north part of India wondering, if you want to go into Uttarakhand or Himachal Pradesh, you have to get a negative report that is taken just 48 hours earlier.
48.
But I guess
72 hours.
72 hours earlier. So that is why many people who are going to the hills want this report. So, okay, Abantika, just tell me regarding those vaccines. Now, much fun was made that Russia has given a vaccine, and you know what happens when you take any medication from Russia. You know, so the poisoning of Putin, which has been made famous all over the world. But after that, the Lancet, representative, I saw that interview on CNN, kind of endorsed Russia's test, saying that it is sound and it is, statistically accurate. So you've been covering health. Is that the case? Why is there no such excitement all over the world then ki bhai ho gayi vaccine?
Perhaps one reason is that there are all these US scientists who are actually saying these are copy pastes. The data is copy paste. They've written an open letter saying that this is they've used very strong words about the vaccine, about the data, not so much about the vaccine. We don't know what it is, but they have basically said that this data looks like a sort of a copy paste job. So I'm just looking at that letter, and it says that there are possible duplications. The odds of this arising by coincidence are extremely small. So very strong words there. Also, I think India seems to be, one of very few countries who's really excited about the vaccine. But the good thing is that they'll have to do a phase 3 trial in India before it is approved. So I'm sure we will look at it. I'm hoping we look at it better, and we will not sort of do the kind of things that made us say we will have a vaccine by August 15.
So it won't be purchased and marketed. There's going to be a testing phase between the two, even in India.
Yes, that's a regulatory requirement. You have to have a phase 3 trial here in India before you can do anything with the vaccine. Also, this particular tie-up that has happened with Dr. Reddy's. So Dr. Reddy's is not exactly a vaccine manufacturing company. So what all they'll do is they'll supply, they'll distribute, they'll do the trials. But the actual manufacturing, who will do, is not yet clear. They're in talks with several companies.
Dr. Reddy's labs will do the trials, not manufacturing or sales.
No, they will do the distribution and trials, not the manufacturing. Actual manufacturing in India, that has to be still tied up.
I see. Now, just let me see what our panel thinks. Revati, would you take that vaccine, the Russian vaccine, if it was in the market next month?
I don't mind. I'm quite trigger happy when it comes to medicines. But the larger point, I think the politics around what is okay, what is acceptable. Is a vaccine from Oxford more acceptable than one from Russia? Those are questions actually that are more interesting for me as a journalist. We get into the politics of what countries and their image is okay to sell into the world, and therefore the pharmaceutical companies attached to that and the politics around it. And stemming from that, our own domestic politics and how convenient it is for governments, authoritarian governments like ours, to really have a pandemic like this with which they can say just about anything. And no questions are asked. Not that many questions are being asked even otherwise, including once our parliament opens. But they're being allowed to get away with anything. They're browbeating us into saying, if you step out here, we will do this. We will tell you when to move out of your house. We will tell you where to walk, where not to walk. It's the best thing ever. If I was looking at it from the point of view of the power makers in this country right now, I would say let the pandemic be.
Yeah, nothing could be better. Exactly. I think just what's happened in Delhi, which I'll be discussing later on in the podcast, with the kind of the charge sheets, the cases against people. I mean, I'm shocked, the brazenness. I mean, they're not even pretending to kind of be clever about it. Copy paste of evidences. Anyway, but I'll come to that later. But how about you, Abantika? Would you take the vaccine if it were available next month in the market, the Russian one?
Not next month. No way. If it's available next month, I'm not taking it.
Any, not just the Russian one. Oxford, koi bhi.
Next month, agar koi bhi available hai, I'm not taking it.
I see.
There has to be a time period.
Okay, but you don't have a problem with the Russian vaccine. It's not Chinese goods mat kharidna. You don't have that. I mean, that's not a problem for you, right?
No, and also, frankly, I've been out. It's a little problematic to say this, but I've been out the entire lockdown. I've been reporting. I've been meeting people who've tested positive later and all of that. But I think for me, the best vaccine that has worked, not even masks, is washing hands. So I would probably not even queue up like early on for any vaccine, even later on.
Raman sir, would you take it?
I'll go by the doctor's advice. I mean, I have
see.
nothing to say in this.
Well, Veer Sanghvi on his Twitter is not being very complimentary to doctors these days. I'm wondering if he's had a bad experience with a doctor. He's saying just because you have a degree doesn't mean. Anyway, there was basically, I think, Pallavi Ghosh, the journalist from IBN, or someone had tweeted this thing, something like your Google's, thank you for your Google search.
Yeah, don't confuse my medical degree with Google.
Yeah, don't confuse my medical degree with your Google search 5 minutes ago. And Veer commented on that. Well, my Google search was 10 minutes back. Your degree was 15 years ago. Have you kept pace? Like, I thought that was very uncharacteristic of him trying to discredit. And then that went on and other people joined, like does happen on Twitter. Before we move on, I have a few letters from subscribers. And thank you, subscribers. Almost all of you, except 2 or 3, have kept your word limit to what I had said, so we can have more letters included. And also the Newslaundry and Teamwork Arts partnership that created the Media Rumble kicks off today while we're recording, which is the Thursday. But do check out the Media Rumble. There's several very interesting sessions which you will definitely enjoy. Go to themediarumble.com and see the schedule. So Shankar Chandrasekhar is the subscriber who has given some feedback. He says, this is Shankar writing from Amsterdam. I'm writing to you not as a freeloader, which I ashamedly was over the last few weeks. And even before that, where I was just listening to the Chota Hafta and raving about it, but doing nothing to keep news free. But a subscriber to both the Disruptor and NL Sena Bishop options. Thank you so much, Shankar. It is very sweet of you. I'm so incredibly thankful to the work that you all do. As someone who has been living abroad for a very long time, I've found it increasingly difficult to find a constant source of sane and brilliant reporting. I finally stumbled upon you guys during March of this year, which is why you are reading this out loud. And Shankar goes on to say, we should definitely shame him for being late to this game. No, Shankar, I have no intention of shaming you. The fact that you have realized that it's important to pay to keep news free is good enough for me. I have one question. While I love the fact that you read out the opinions of many of your subscribers, some of the most brilliantly articulated mails, have you considered dividing it into segments perhaps? One where the panelists, guest journalists share their thoughts on the event of the past week, and the second focusing on subscriber emails. I don't know if this question has been posed before, but again, I have nothing to add but appreciation. Keep doing great work and I'll do my best to spread your work to my Arnab-loving family. P.S. Manisha is fantastic. So thanks, Shankar. I have actually once thought about in the past, I don't know if we actually did it. I think we did do it, where I read out all the mails as a separate addendum to the Hafta at the end. But it didn't work. I think people wanted integrated into the conversation because otherwise many people will not listen to it as a separate kind of segment. So that's why I just integrate the mails into the overall conversation so that I can also get, the views of the panel on those sometimes. This wonderful subscriber doesn't want me to read out her name. She says, I'm a final year undergraduate student, been an on and off subscriber to Newslaundry. I've decided to support Newslaundry again with whatever resources I can. Abhinandan is my favorite. His views help me to stress myself way beyond my capacity and to think also and ponder upon the complexity of an issue. I was listening to old Haftas and found Manisha and Mehraj's views intriguing, which prompted me to subscribe to NL despite the paucity of resources currently. I don't believe in monkey balancing. I've seen people in the comment section who abuse day in and day out when you talk in support of minorities or question Hindutavadis, damning you as a bunch of left liberal jabbering against tolerant Hindus, and their contention is that Hindus have been quite tolerant all these years as opposed to Muslims, pointing at the conditions of minorities in Islamic countries, and then having some sort of moral superiority that Hindus have let Muslims flourish in this country for so long, and someday they'll take over the Hindu population, leading to a disaster. It would be better if you bring in some more sane voices on this panel, like Anand Vardhan. His pieces have been great insights. Thank you so much. I don't want to name you, but you're a student, you're young, and you're still paying with your meager resources to keep news and journalism independent. That is really wonderful. And I hope others of your age are as responsible. In fact, I hope many of your uncle and aunties are more responsible, because people of my age still end up not paying for news and then whine about it all their lives. And this email is from Sagar Prasad. He says, "Hi Abhinandan, while listening to the emails you read in Hafta 292, I got a sense that many of your listeners believe that issues related to Islam and Muslims don't get debated, discussed or criticized enough. I think these people should view YouTube videos by Abdullah Samir or Abdullah Gondal. There are links to the few YouTube videos in this mail which could help change that impression. One may not agree with the views in these videos, but I want to make a point that Islam and Muslims do get criticized often on social media, but we rarely notice stuff like this. Regards, Sagar." Thank you, Sagar. We shall put this email in the email section and these links are available there. We have an article with all these mails that go out. Well, not all, but many of them. And you can check out Sagar's links on that article. Now, okay, I just want to move on from COVID to something that impacts all of us. And I'd like at least 3 of you are still journalists in some form or the other. I used to be one. Raman sir, let me start with you. Let me put the context that, like in the headlines we had shared, that Suresh Chawanke, this hateful gubbara who runs this hate campaign on his hot air program, it's just vile and disgusting. He ran the promo ki ab bindas bol ab hoga whatever UPSC Jihad hum kaise Jamia ke jihadi, and some kids from Jamia went to the court and said this should be stopped. The court said, yeah, Delhi High Court said stopped. Central INV Ministry, which is so wonderful, the INV Ministry that had banned the documentary that NTV, they had banned Revati, the one on the rape case, right? On Jyoti Singh's rape case, who's also called Nirbhaya.
The Channel 4 one.
Yeah, the Channel 4 documentary. So they had banned that, but on this one they said no, he has the right. Freedom of speech. But after the show was aired and it demonstrated that it was full of hate and lies, the Supreme Court has said that there should be some sort of regulation, that you cannot allow this. And they have also commented on the nature of debates, the hate going around. And today the Indian Express has, put up an edit saying, sorry, your lordships. This is basically saying that judges should not weigh in on this. The centre has said that before we start regulating TV channels, we should regulate digital media because they have a further reach. I mean, like I said, this government has even stopped pretending to be sensible or not wanting to be hateful. They have said, fuck it, it works. No one gives a shit. You can take your mask off and be as hateful as possible. So that's the context. I'd like to start with you, Raman sir. Where are you? Do you think no matter how hateful Chawanke is, judges and the court should not weigh in on what they can get away with and what they can't get away with? Should there be another regulatory framework? Of course, no one has said there already is a regulatory framework. Whether it works or not is a different matter. Where are you on this? Should the judges have stopped the airing of that show? Does it set a bad precedent?
I did not see the show, but I did read the report.
What kind of a journalist are you? You don't watch such brilliant journalists.
I did not see his show, but I did read the report that we did on him, and the report was graphically.
Just to say, Raman sir tortures our wonderful colleagues. He made Ayush watch the show and write a report so that he can just read it.
But I had seen the promo. So the promo itself. If you just look at the promo is enough to put him under UAPA Act. He should be booked. This case was a criminal act.
Because what they have booked Umar for is far less than this.
It's less than that.
The speeches that they claim, or Pinjra Tod activist speeches, are far less than what this guy was saying in his promo.
Look at the past 6-year history. In the name of this freedom of speech, the way that this government has interpreted in the past 6 years, it varies. I mean, people who have not spoken anything, who had just a book on Marx in his, house. Yeah. He has been booked under UAPA.
Yeah, right.
So he has been called Maoist and all. So they have no other, and they are behind the bar for the past 2 years.
But do you think the court should step in and does it set a bad precedent that tomorrow then it could shut down any channel?
I think the first and foremost, the police should step in. If the police do not, the vigilant citizens, they had approached the court also. Court had given a stay and the court should have taken
So you're saying, even as a journalist, by what you saw in the promo, it was enough to ban him?
It was enough.
Revati, I don't know whether you've seen the promo, but in case you know what this guy is, you want to weigh in on this? Does it set a bad precedent tomorrow?
One more thing I want to add, that Ayush, who has done this story, he has pointed out point by point. So I don't need to see that show. Point by point, he has shown the violation.
Listed the violations as per the current IBNB
So
norms.
take action.
Yeah, Revati, go ahead.
Abhinandan, I think what happens is in these conversations, we mix up legal precedent with hate speech and incitement to violence quite often. So incitement to violence in our courts, it's very clear that anything that incites violence, whether you say something on the street or I go out there and incite a mob to do something, or whether I do a show which has the same effect, the same law applies. Often when we use the legal precedent, that it becomes something that unfortunately plays into the hands of the administration, because they use whatever legal precedent and distort it in whatever way they like. Section 377 was struck down, and then the Solicitor General goes and tells the court, sorry, this is against our values. So what kind of legal precedent? If we're talking about legal precedents, then legal precedents are jumped every hour depending on who's in court and who's playing out whose game. So that's very transparent and clear. Therefore, I don't think we should decontextualize any of these conversations about what should be banned and should not be banned. When this book on the Delhi riots, purportedly presenting only a PR picture of the BJP and supposedly being inaugurated by Kapil Sharma, was being published and released, then many of us raised our voices against it. But then there was also some amount of measure, which is correct, to say, let the book be out instead of and read it first before you criticize it. Otherwise, we are doing the same thing that we accuse the others of doing, of being intolerant without examining the evidence first. So that's correct. We should watch things before critiquing them. However, if we know that something is in the space that is likely to incite mobs, like Kapil Sharma's speech, many of us still argue they do, like this Sudarshan TV show purportedly supposed to have done. I haven't seen it.
The promo itself. You're saying the promo itself wasn't it?
I haven't seen the promo either. But I'm saying that the decision before anyone, an administration, a court, or people holding both of these to account should be, is something causing violence, not about whether there's a blanket acceptance of all sorts of freedom or a blanket curbing of all sorts of freedom. Because blanket itself is in the realm of authoritarianism. Anything that is blanket is authoritarian. Anything that is context-based and fluid is the opposite of that. So I'd go with that.
Abantika, what do you think? Have you seen the promo? Have you seen the show?
I haven't seen either the program or the promo, but I completely agree. I completely agree with Revati.
But do you know who Mr. Gubbara Chwanke is? Or even that is something that you have been protected from?
No, I learned who he is very recently. After this program, after the stories and all of that.
I've also only very briefly Googled. I'm guilty of not knowing. So please educate.
I will. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Abantika. You want to elaborate?
No, so I was just saying Revati has put it so beautifully. And I completely agree with her that, there are, once something like this happens. So for example, let me take the example of the Prashant Bhushan case. It's not the 1 rupee, it's the precedence. So similarly, once you start this trend, anybody can feel affronted at anything we write. Somebody may say, you are against Shivraj Chauhan's milk idea for kids, so you're against Hinduism, so I'm upset, so I lodge a police complaint. It's just endless. Somebody can just go to court and say this. So I think, I completely agree with what Revati said.
So it has to be... sorry, go ahead, sir.
This, the promo that I had seen, it falls in that category. Inciting violence.
Right.
So I also agree with that. I mean,
but you're saying this was
inciting violence.
It had breached that already.
It had completely breached that.
Right. And I think context is important, not just in the sense of what that specific speech or promo or that piece of content is. I think context also is a function of what is the prevailing kind of value system and what are the accepted or acceptable injustices. And I've discussed this earlier in the Hafta. When I was in Germany for a program on the media only, and there were a whole bunch of people. Dhanya was also there, and we had this dialogue with this MP from Liberal Democrat Party in Germany, and it was about freedom of expression and stuff. And they said, our mandate is that there should be freedom of expression, especially for the media all over the world, which is why they organize these workshops and programs. I said, how do you resolve, here, if I were just to do a Heil Hitler on the street, I could be arrested, right? I mean, forget hate speech. I can't even do that. And yet you do want to champion, which is a good thing, freedom of speech in all parts of the world. Not that I think that it's a good thing to do that, but I was trying to understand, how does one resolve these two things? And what emerged was that some countries, a big injustice has happened, like in Rwanda. It is against the law to ask whether you're a Hutu or a Tutsi. You cannot ask and you cannot tell. You can be jailed for that because of the horror that happened in the early 90s over there. And of course, what happened in Germany, everybody is aware of. So are you to wait for such an injustice to criminalize such an activity, or do you let such an activity go, let something like what happened in Delhi happen all over the country, and then say, now you can't do this? You get what I'm saying? It's a tough one. I don't think there are easy answers to that. But the prevailing environment in the country right now, I am rethinking my absolutism on freedom of speech, because the kind of things that people find acceptable today shock me. I mean, I don't hold my punches. Jaggi's been a friend, now he's the editorial director. The kind of crap that he tweets and endorses. I mean, someone who, to me, because, I had spoken to a bunch of digital outfits, and when that ban happened on that documentary film, I said we should all carry the same statement. And everybody at News Minute, Scroll, Quint, everybody carried that same statement. He said, no, I think it's right what's happened with NDTV. And today he wants to champion freedom of speech. Why? For a case like Chawanke. I mean, आपकी कैसी फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच की रेवोल्यूशनरी पन जाग गया ऐसे टुच्चे आदमी के लिए जब सारी जिंदगी आप चुप रहे. So I think the existing value system has made me rethink what I thought of what should be allowed to be said.
All of this actually comes in a context. It's not just about media and freedom of speech. It comes down from the top. When ministers, very senior ministers, say things which are very clearly against a particular community, when things like go to Pakistan and stuff like that are said. So that's where you set the tone of the conversation. That's where you set the tone of what is acceptable in public speech, in public discourse. And I think there are cues that are taken which sort of come down. And then, obviously there is media and there is media. So media freedom, it's not something that can be seen in isolation, or what is acceptable for media to say or not say. It's not something that's in isolation. Like you said, that the general prevailing atmosphere, it's politicians say that because their constituencies buy it.
Exactly.
And
it's acceptable.
TV channels show this because TRPs, the TRP numbers show that this sells. So it's more than just what one channel is saying. It's more about the kind of vitiating atmosphere that has been created in the country over the years, very gradually, where this sort of thing is acceptable. It's not just acceptable, it's very saleable.
Right. I want to come to Revati on this because she's somewhat of an expert on this subject. But before that, Raman, sir, you want to come in and say something?
I can recall one thing that he had said in the promo. He said that he talked about Muslim infiltrating into this IAS, IPS. एक जिहादी आपका DM बन के आएगा. जिहादी आपका DM बन के आएगा. एक terrorist बन आपका. उसने ये वर्ड बोला. Now there are laws which clearly, he should be under UPSC.
So he had already breached the law.
That was said in the promo.
In the promo itself. Now, Rev, you've written this book, which was a very brave and daunting task, and congratulations. I don't know whether you spent a year or 2 years in Gujarat, The Anatomy of Hate, where you tried to, and you spent some very turbulent times with, people who did participate in the violence and in the plunder and rape and murder. And you tried to kind of, from a very sympathetic view, try to understand the mindset of a person who does this, who himself is underprivileged, has been at the receiving end of an unjust society. And you actually wrote a book along those lines. So you must have got some sort of an insight into the psyche of the people who, before they go out and do that, they have to be convinced that doing that is okay. What do you get? What is the mindset, and is it contagious, and has it spread all over the country to people who have no reason to feel aggrieved or angered, even while they've lived very privileged lives, yet they, for some reason, think that it's okay to demonize other communities because they feel they've been shafted? How does that mind work? What did you find?
So, first, it wasn't a sympathetic look. It was just an unsparing, detailed, inside-out look. But what I found is that hate crimes, yes, they are contagious, and that contagion has spread much more than the pandemic. So we are much more afflicted by anti-Muslimness than by COVID. And if you were to do a meter on that, I'm sure if there was a way to gauge it, we'd have very, very shocking numbers. It'd be like 90% of our population afflicted by that. But what I also found was three things. Firstly, that these ideas and views are set in motion at various levels, and it's not one thing, it's many things. So for one person, it could be coming from a background where your own identity is weak, your sense of self is very poor, and you're looking to lean on a larger narrative, and that larger narrative that presents itself in the absence of anything else happens to be Hindutva. And so you lean on that, and you, instead of being pummeled by the Muslims who tend to group easier in the village around you, now have the arm of the Bajrang Dal, the VHP, and their allied gundas to be able to fight back. So you get real money, muscle power, political and social status immediately by joining this. So there are real benefits. So this is one set of people that benefit really, and we have to be able to imagine what that life is like before we diss it. We can't sit in our own comfortable cocoons and say how dare they live like that. Well, we are not living in the kind of squalor, the kind of emasculation that they live with. So we need to first feel our way through that before we point fingers at them.
But how do you explain that mindset when it afflicts people with privilege, with more privilege than you and I have seen?
That's what I was coming to. That's one set. But at the other end, there are upper class people who also have similar toxic views and xenophobic ideas of the world. And I would say that in my reading, I think that money and privilege doesn't always equal inclusiveness and human rights. And that's because money and privilege sometimes sit alongside an aspirational mindset that can be present even in the richest. It can be present in the captains of industry. The new money idea of always feeling inadequate can just outlive your actually getting money for a very long time. So it will take a few generations for people with this new money to be comfortable in their skin. Being comfortable in your skin can outlive your poverty. You can be actually now lower middle class, but have come from 3 generations of money and education and now have no money and be living in squalor, but still be more comfortable in your skin than, say, an Ambani. Sure. So this literal application of mindset with class is something that we as people studying this phenomenon have to stop doing. But overall, yes, hate is much more contagious than anything else. It is a much easier political tool to use than anything else, which is why it's being used. However, it is shifting sands, and that is a key thing. The minute other more permanent ways of holding on to your identity and beefing up your identity are present, are usable, and are convertible into something real, which means that if you can get your power, money, social status from something more permanent than the immediacy of hate, people do shift. And one of the principal characters in the book, who I've actually studied for 13 years before I wrote the book, actually did do that. He went from being on the edge of the mob to a left liberal atheist. And his journey was very, very powerful. And that is the space I'm currently sitting in. I think what's important when we're looking at hate crimes, whether we're looking at the Delhi riots, whether we're looking at individual lynchings, whether we're looking at just drawing room conversations in our midst that are toxic, I think what I have basically found is that it is more productive to change the narrative. Stop reacting to the existing narrative, because that plays right into the hands of the power mongers at present, which is the present regime.
Right, because clearly it is working for them. It has worked for them in the past several years.
So the main thing is create other identifiers, create other ways of looking at the world, create other ways of being. So for instance, in the place I'm located in, I'm asking myself, is it possible to create another identity for this area that has seen religious polarization? Is it possible for there other ways? Is it possible to look at this place as a place full of mango groves, as a place where the 7th gharana of Hindustani classical music exists? Can those become more powerful narratives? And how do you make those things more powerful narratives so that people can hold on to them, find a means of livelihood through it, and therefore steer themselves away from identity politics. But the other concomitant question is that, what happens often is that when we're talking about identity politics and so and so should be put in jail for the hate speech, and why is the law not functioning, is that we are trying to look for answers in a reading writing space in a largely non-reading writing society. I think we've got to stop, as media people, we've got to stop looking literally at the written word and the law for answers. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't apply those, but I'm saying we have to dig much deeper. We've got to look at how people behave, because the right wing is doing that. The right wing makes a speech which is very thinly veiled hate speech, and they get away with it because they know they can, because they know that their constituents have understood what they're really trying to say. Why are we playing back that literal by the book thing? Why aren't we also looking at the oral storytelling spaces, at sitting down and having conversations, at what we really mean rather than what we're saying?
So I just, wanted, Abantika, I know you have to go. You said you have to go in 45 minutes. So on this, if you could just weigh in from your reporting experience, all that you've seen, what do you think of the psychology that kind of makes people endorse or shrug their shoulders at, a mob lynching or something of the sort? Is it identity? And, on the related topic, I think what Revati said, politicians in UP have realized that as long as they were doing they were reacting to the Muslim attacks by the BJP and Yogi government, they weren't getting traction. But now both Congress and AAP leaders have started saying that under this Thakur chief minister, the Brahmins are at risk. And that apparently is working better than the justice for Muslims, which is interesting and I think a little unfortunate. But that shifting of the identity does definitely work politically. It's been shown. But yeah, Abantika, go ahead.
Yeah, so actually the UP example, and also in West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee just announced a dole for Brahmin Purohits, the priests, like she had done for imams. So it's the same logic that's happening in West Bengal as well. But I think why people turn a blind eye is 2-3 things. A, it's not happening to me. My children are safe. I'm not from that community. I'm from the right community. And also somewhere which is very, it's very scary, but among educated people, among people who have led like very good lives all their lives, they kind of say, yeah, they deserve it. So that I have never quite figured out why, but it's just the way it is. I don't know why that is. Maybe for my community, for Bengalis, I see there are these, very sort of festering wounds. I don't know why they're still festering so many years later, but there are wounds of partition, and there's a bit of hidden anti-Muslim sort of thing because they did this to us at the time of partition. But other than that, I can't even understand that. But yeah, that's how it is.
My theory is, although my experience of the partition generation, my grandmother and my parents are from that generation. All my mother's Tamil, so they were not touched by partition. But my dad, who's Punjabi, and he used to live in Lahore, and they came here and they lost a lot. But I always noticed that people who were directly impacted by partition, who'd seen it up close, were hardcore Congress supporters, and they hated the Sangh. But people who had only heard or observed the partition but not been directly impacted, generally that's my just personal observation of people who I've dealt with. Like even when I came to college and when I had just joined Newstrack, the people who really, this is what they did partition. I said, was your family? No, but we've heard. But everybody whose family was actually impacted weren't that angry, and they didn't want blood the way that. But I think it's deeply personal. And there was an article that I've suggested in Hafta, many, many months ago about the incels. I think The Atlantic or Slate had carried an article about the involuntary celibates who tend to be flocked to these white supremacist kind of rallies, and they have misogynist views. At least from many of the people who I have known well and observed, people who were probably bullied, or they didn't feel that they got the respect that they deserved in college. They were not the popular ones, and in some sense, the incels. And I use this, word very carefully. So I don't want it to sound like, I'm one of those mean girls from those sitcoms in colleges. But, the people who were the losers who no one hang out with, I've seen many of them suddenly get power and a voice. And I think this is that time that they are sitting on panels and telling all those people, oh, you fuckers who used to treat us badly, now see the power I have. And I think Arnab is actually one of those. I think
You're
that is...
absolutely right.
It comes from a very personal
Abhinandan.
space. It doesn't come from an ideological space. It comes from a very personal
It
space.
comes from much deeper than ideology.
And Revati, I don't want to take names. It would be unfair. But many of the very well-known political leaders, who are there, I have gone to school with them. And I know the status that they had there. And even today, when they are in that same environment, all this bombast goes. They become that person. We never outgrow that adolescent bullying that we felt. They become, and I'm like, dude, when you're on screen, you're doing this here, you don't even fucking dare to say a thing because all those 5 guys who bullied you back then still have that power over you. And I think it comes from a very deeply personal space and not ideological. Sorry.
And that deeply personal space is also mixed up with who has power at birth sometimes, because people who are more comfortable in their skin sometimes are more comfortable in their skin because of the environment they've grown up in. And therefore, the corrective measures that we need to think about is how do you create those environments? How are we then, if we want this to stop, how are we creating those ascending stairs going into places like Muzaffarnagar, Shamli, parts of Assam, Karnataka, which is so full of hate? All of UP, Haryana, Punjab. Why are we not being able to think structurally through this? Why are we being reactive? We, on the other side, who do not like this politics of hate, have to then come up with structural solutions which stem from putting back those building blocks that we know are not there.
Right. That very, very well articulated. So, Abantika, you have to carry on. So please give us a recommendation and thank you for joining us. What would you recommend that would enrich the lives of our listeners?
Okay, so there's this book. I know many of you must have already read it, but it's one of my favorite books. It's called Factfulness. It's by Hans Rosling. So it basically teaches you to sort of see through the headlines. So for example, when we say that India has the most number of baby deaths in the world, what we don't say is how many baby deaths we've actually prevented. So what the point he makes is that the world is now actually a better place than it was 100 years ago, even though you feel the other way because of the way news is presented. And what this book did to me in a sort of lighter vein, I could never actually watch Pride and Prejudice after reading this book without thinking that these guys don't have running water. So,
Right.
So it's a very, very interesting book. It's very nicely written, very nicely explained. It's a beautiful book. So I very strongly recommend the book.
I see. So just before you go, he had made TED Talks a household name when very few people used to listen to TED.
That's right.
Many of his TED Talks, went viral because his data visualization was so beautiful. And I saw his presentation on the world has become more peaceful as opposed to more violent, even though what we get. And he uses only data. And while I really loved the man and his presentation, he was funny. His accent was just so interesting. I didn't always agree with that particular presentation because I think, when you bung in 2 world wars, I mean, those are outlier events. Those outlier events warp the statistics. So I didn't quite agree with his reading of data was almost like a machine. It was stripped of context. And I think in most cases he was right and brilliant and he made us think things in a less obvious way. And his genius was exactly that. But I think in his later years, shortly before he died, I think he went too far on depending only on data. I know, I just felt that. And what you said, NPR has a very interesting podcast on today, you are more comfortable in like a 1-bedroom apartment with plumbing, even if you're middle class, than you would be as a king 200 years ago. Because of stuff like running water, plumbing, air conditioning, disease. Even if you were bloody Akbar, Humayun, Queen Elizabeth, back then, you'd be worried about smallpox ho jayega, mujhe fever ho jayega, mar jayega. Now you have everything. So even the life of a middle class person is better than the life of Maharaja like 300 years ago. So yeah, that's interesting. Thanks so much, Abantika. Good luck for your work. Do check out your work at ThePrint. Thank you for making the time to join us. And have a good day. And check out the Media Rumble if you get the chance. You register. We have lots of very interesting panels. And we have one on the ethics of the internet. In fact, I'm doing that. I'm very excited. I had heard this gentleman speak when I was at a conference in Morocco. And he talks about how algorithms are not judgment free. And he gave the example of cars, self-driving cars, because all the test cases were white people who were used, it would often not take into account a black passenger because that was not used as part of the learnings and algorithms that when it went to create. But very interesting. So check it out. Abantika, have a nice day. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, guys, before we move on, I just want to read out a few more mails if you don't mind. This one is from Shivansh Singhal. Shivansh says, Dear NL team, my name is Shivansh Singhal. I have been a Newslaundry subscriber since March 2020. I'm a PhD student at the National Centre for Biological Science, Bangalore. I have some comments. Shivansh beta, mails likhne ke bajaye vaccine nikalo, biological science mein baithe ho. No, just joking, bro. Thanks for writing. And you say, regarding the Hafta, I feel the NL team is slightly biased against the right wing. I've been listening to some interviews that clearly have intelligent opinion, but clearly leaning to the right. I don't see the NL panel bringing up these intelligent points in the right wing that the right wing makes, as rare as they may be. For that reason, I feel the NL panel leans left. I've attached some links to these interviews to help make my point. The man in these videos, J. Sai Deepak, is a lawyer. He is clearly biased, but he gets a historical context in a way that seems legit. I have not heard these arguments anywhere else, maybe because I'm stuck in the social media bubble and my YouTube suggestions are skewed. I would have liked to see these arguments being brought up in the NL Hafta because I expect you guys to be truly neutral. I'm sorry if I sound upset. I just mean this as food for thought. I love what NL does and I support you guys. I would suggest you call some people from academia, such as professors and researchers, to discuss the nitty-gritty details of some topic like COVID-19 and to get a view of the bleeding edge of research on topics of public interest. Actually, Sagar, Hafta isn't the platform for that. Hafta is just a conversation between journalists. We have other podcasts and interviews with area experts here. The Nuisance, Manisha's, is my favorite NL product. I don't have a TV, so I'm safe from Arnab and other toxic anchors. But I like to get that weekly gist of the bullshit that appears on TV because it gives me things to talk about when I call my mother. Thank you for what you guys do. You're my main source of real news. I listen to your podcast all the time. Since I joined in March this year, I have a ton of content from before that I can now access. I'm saving up so I can contribute to the next NL Sena project as well. Regardless of my financial contribution, I would like to offer my help to NL in any way I can. Shivansh, thank you so much. When I get mails like this from people who are studying, who are students, and are still saving so that they can contribute to us, I really feel, I don't mean this in the Amitabh Bachchan accepting the Filmfare Award way, but I truly feel blessed. And I must tell you, when we started Newslaundry in 2012, and I'm telling you, other than two people who I presented to, every single news professional or business professional or investor told me, Indians will not pay for news. हम नहीं करेंगे, कोई नहीं करेगा. You will fold up, you will die, nothing will happen. So thank you for people like Shivansh and the anonymous, well, I know who she is, but the one who didn't want her name told. Students like you, young people like you are paying to keep news free. And if that still doesn't shame some of the older people who make enough money, I can only assume they should just get the news that they deserve and they should watch Times Now and Arnab and Z. Then this mail is from Uttam. Hi, I'm a new subscriber, says Uttam. I wholeheartedly support independent media. That's why I have subscribed. Recently, you people were discussing many aspects about Islam and searching for rational voices who can pinpoint the problems of Islam. For this, I would like to recommend 2-3 rational voices from the Muslim community who called themselves ex-Muslims because they have left Islam and now are leading a free life. Hari Sultan, an ex-Muslim from Pakistan currently residing in Australia. His command over science and religion will make discussions more interesting. And you have given a link to his YouTube channel. Then Ghalib Kamal, one of the great minds coming from Pakistan. He has great authority over science and Islamic text. You have linked his channel. And Spartacus, an ex-Muslim, though we don't know his actual name for security reasons, he has been persecuted in the name of blasphemy law. He has great command over Islamic text. Hope you find it interesting. So thank you for this, Uttam. I hope some of these links will be useful to listeners of the Hafta. Now let's get back to the discussion, and this time it is around what is happening in Delhi. So you just tell me about this Delhi case, the police is doing. Now you have, I think amongst journalists in India, probably amongst the most experience with the police. You've done some fantastic, famously the caged parrot CBS story was your story. Many of you who listen to Hafta may not know that, but Raman sir was the architect of that story. And you have covered crime and the police beat for much of your younger reporting life. How does something like this happen? An 11,000 page charge sheet, Umar Khalid arrested
17,000.
17,000, sorry. Umar Khalid arrested on the basis of a speech where he is saying that we will not follow violence. And the police, Mr. Ribeiro, he was the commissioner of police in Delhi. What was he? Ribeiro, who's written that letter?
No, he was Punjab DGP, Maharashtra DGP.
Oh, I see. So he's held very... So he's written a letter. If you could just give us the context, what has happened if this case, and you've got a lot of experience, will it be thrown out in court? And by then, what will happen to all these people who've been arrested?
I happen to know this police commissioner. He was DCP in Delhi when I was, I think, Metro editor with Pioneer. Now he's the interim police commissioner. He is not the appointed police commissioner. I was given this conspiracy theory at that time. Complete mindset. And how did they go? They said there were 23 protests happening in Delhi.
So they have you're saying they have decided the outcome. The mindset is, and now they just want to get evidences to confirm that theory of theirs.
When this police commissioner was, I think, heading the special cell or somewhere, and he handled that cricket batting case too, where this South Indian cricketer, Shrishant, he fixed him. He was also arrested. He was at that time also, the charge sheet ran into thousands of pages. So Shrikant, the court has already thrown out his case. Okay, so I am just giving you the background, how things work in Delhi police. Now there was a mindset. I can very clearly see it. And the story is very simple conspiracy mindset.
So what is the conspiracy? That these guys were doing protests?
No, I tell you. The conspiracy is, they said in the entire Delhi, there were 23 protests happening. All these 23 protests were happening in the Muslim places. The locals were peaceful, but there were outsiders who were coming, like Umar, like the other politicians.
So they're saying jo local nukkad wale the colony, they were peaceful protesters, but these guys infiltrated and made it violent.
They came and they started setting the tone of the protests. So
they're also not saying that they directly indulge in violence. They started
setting the tone of the protest. So when the Trump was coming in, so that is when they decided, the conspiracy began, that when Trump comes in, we will do chakka jam, and hence the violence. So then this chakka jam resulted into a violence. So this is their theory. And what they are saying, that they have, see, the 17,000 pages of charge sheet, only 2,000 pages are where the police is alleging. The rest of the pages are the annexures. And what are those annexures?
WhatsApp conversations.
WhatsApp conversation between the locals, where this topmost cop told me that the locals are telling these outsiders who are coming, labor activists, or say for example Omar and anybody. So when there is a heated argument and on the WhatsApp between the two, the locals are not so much interested in chakka jam, because that may result into violence. But these outsiders, they imposed that chakka jam on them. So they are trying to fix all these,
basically the
activists.
Places. So Revati, you have covered, you were in Gujarat in 2002 or after that? Because I remember you were reporting out of Gujarat for a while.
I was NDTV's Gujarat correspondent the year after the riots. In that year is the year when this whole thing of alleged assassination attempts against Modi and various Muslims being arrested and then later found dead, like the Jahan case, and all of those started to emerge in that year. So that is a tried and tested formula that we can definitely draw the dots back from Umar Khalid to that. Sort of seems like an establishment formula.
So just so that I understand this correctly, what you're saying is, even back then, although the riot was, there was enough evidence even of journalists of enough Hindu mobs going at Muslims, even then the investigation suggested that this was engineered by Muslims. Is that right? Is that what the police investigation there also kind of was coming up with?
Police investigation into the riots at that point of time didn't have much political currency, even though the NDA government was in power at the center, because the national mood and the international mood was against what happened in 2002 in Gujarat. But Modi and Shah learned their lessons from them in media, from that very quickly in media management, which they have perfected, and they managed to overturn. So what I'm saying is, the year after the riots, what happened was the media was fed stories which a lot of the soon to become pliant media swallowed whole, was that there were all these assassination attempts on the on the Chief Minister of Gujarat, based on the fact that there had been communal violence the previous year, and that therefore these Muslims are responsible. It was a retaliation against the riots, and that therefore they were killed in various encounters. This story of creating an enemy and then spinning stories post facto about what the case should look like. And in fact, many police officers that have now, some of whom have claimed that they were the original, present in a meeting in which Modi discussed how the mobs should stand back, and all those allegations are made by police officers who themselves were actually Modi's men to begin with. That's why they were senior police officers. And so they were pliant, and then they kind of, this whole formula of having your people in place and then having them cook the books and reward them substantially, and then you and they are in the know of things, and so therefore they will never mess with you and you will never mess with them, were things that were tried, tested, perfected at that point of time. This is a hypothesis many of us arrived at. There's no way we can prove it, but it seems to make sense from a logical standpoint as methodology, if you want to join the dots back between why the cops can cook a 17,000-page charge sheet, which is basically gobbledygook. It makes no sense. It's like saying the sun is black and then everything is manufactured to prove it, and then everyone's standing there saying, no, but it looks yellow to me. You are put in jail for saying it.
So, but although Rana's book in some detail had what Revati is talking about with names and specific dates of conversations she had. But Raman sir, you were saying?
No, the further, narrative of this conspiracy, the Delhi police thing, is that again, which is going to come out in all these charge sheets, that this chakka jam led to violence, and first against the police, and then they killed Hindus. The Muslims killed Hindus. They killed 13 Hindu. In retaliation, Hindus killed 40 Muslims. So this is the narrative. This is the full narrative. And you also spoke about whether the judiciary is going to throw out. It has already begun. So Pinjara told people they have got bail.
Right.
Okay, so people are getting bail in this conspiracy theory. Another part of the mindset is there were 753 or 754 FIRs in this case. 753 were with the crime branch, and the only FIR, which is the conspiracy theory which they had to, was with this special branch. So
what's the difference in the two?
The difference between the two, the crime, the special branch was exclusively, normally you get the crime branch if all the cases are given to crime branch. Special branch is the UAPA, deals with the UAPA Act, and they deal with the terrorism of activity. So the special branch was given specifically this conspiracy, to build this conspiracy theory.
And the crime
there was a mindset. And you will see the judiciary, if all goes well, is going to throw this case.
I mean, although there's some rumblings that one hears about the Supreme Court, but we'll come to that hopefully in the next hafta or two. Now, some more emails. Thank you so much. We are getting more and more emails every week. I think we'll actually have to take that suggestion by the earliest subscriber and have a separate podcast of only the emails. Shahala has written again. Shahala, as you remember, had written a piece for us on period leave. She's just written this to make the limited point that Zomato's period leave policy, being complete bullshit, quote unquote, that how many women do they employ. So she is copy pasting the section below, which is that she says, let's begin with Zomato's gender ratio. As per the last available data, out of Zomato's 700 employees, almost half are women. That sounds good on paper and on social media progressive campaigns, but it doesn't take long to get disappointed when you find that the human resource department has 100% women and technology and innovation has barely 5%. So basically it's IIT is 10 to 1 male female. So you've gone on to kind of talk about how women in the Indian labor force is plummeting, but the participation, you've given some data on that. So you can check out Shahala's email on where we publish all the emails. This email is by Shubhang Gautam. Hi Abhinandan sir. Well, nobody's called me sir in a while, but thank you Shubhang. I've been a subscriber since March. The work you guys do is inspiring to say the least. As per your request, I will keep my thoughts within 400 words. I'm a mass comm student. Technically should have graduated in 2020, but COVID had other plans. My question to your panel, How is a budding journalist supposed to navigate his or her way through an industry without selling their soul in the process? Sorry for the filmy expression, but seriously, most organizations are Godi media and that betrays the very essence of the fourth estate. Theory papers में तो हम लिख कर आ जाते हैं keeping our government in check blah blah, but how often does that practically happen? I know the newsroom type idealistic scenario तो सिर्फ HBO के serial में होगा, but I'm certainly interested in the advice you have for someone who intends to put his socio-political bias aside when it comes to the profession. Any advice is appreciated. Shupang, I really feel for your generation, yeah, because my generation didn't have to navigate such a difficult terrain, and we really had it easy in that sense. Because my advice to you is it doesn't matter what organization you work for in your first job. Who are you reporting to and who is your ultimate boss is what should determine your choice in your first job. Because your first job will shape your outlook, your attitude, and your entire philosophical take towards your profession. And if your first boss is a horrible, toxic person who is peddling in fake news or doing really nasty things professionally, either you will become like that and you will think that is normal. And even if you don't become like that, you will think that is normal. So you will be on that spectrum, or you will get completely disillusioned with the profession and just take up something else, having wasted many years of your life. Although I believe no year is wasted as long as you've learned something. So I will just say that even if you're working for a very small outfit, or if you're working for someone who is in an organization which is, let's say, horrible. Like I, for example, think as an organization, Reliance stands for everything that is wrong with this country. But if some small company of Reliance, I don't know if that ad agency is still around, they had an agency called Mudra. So even if it's a larger company, let's take Facebook, which has done so much, or Google. If that unit that you're working for, do a thorough check of that boss, speak to people, speak about what that person's attitude towards their job is, and just go by who are you reporting to. That person's influence will determine how your professional life turns out. I was very, very fortunate and blessed to have Madhu Trehan as my first boss and others who I reported to. Okay, this subscriber, he doesn't want me to say his name, so I will address him by his initials, ER. ER says a bit of criticism and some support directed at Anand V. Anand's views on debauchery deserve criticism as they reflect an anachronistic view. I understand where he's coming from, but who are he and I to decide what constitutes debauchery and why should we impose our views on others? This is personal for me, as Indian Catholics are stereotyped as hedonistic and debauched people. We smoke, drink, party, interact across genders and generally enjoy life. A regressive, straight-jacketed conformist society like India sees us as debauchers. Yeah, you're so right. I've discussed it in a podcast, I think, in Awful and Awesome, that in the 70s and 80s, whenever they wanted to show a girl who wears short skirts and drinks and is loose outside marriage, she'd always be called Julie or Bobby, or, she'd be, and her father would be a drunkard who'd be singing on the beach. It was a very Catholic, you're right. Anyway, you go on to say, am I committing debauchery for smoking marijuana in Canada, a country with the wisdom to legalize the plant instead of wasting state resources on potheads? Also, the people whom Anand was accusing of debauchery, were they alcoholics? What constitutes excessive alcohol consumption? Anand, no role model should be emulated in their entirety. I also dislike Anand's tendency to not take a stand and simply claim to put his faith in the law. Anand should be intimately familiar with how India law enforcement works. You simply cannot put your faith in a system that puts murderers and rapists in positions of power, and one where evidence has a tendency to vanish. I'm also disappointed that he refuses to empathize with Ria's witch hunt and his failure to simply acknowledge that the Ria Kangana issue is political vendetta and a clear misuse of state machinery. A defense of Anand, let him speak. His cadence is slower than most, but although I sometimes struggle to follow his ideas, let him finish. Don't pounce off him with counter questions. Criticism of Abhinandan. The Hafta really needs someone to keep track of what the question asked was and whether it was answered or not. The idea of Hafta as a free-flowing discussion is well and good, but a basic structure where question and answers are completed would make it better. Okay, ER, thank you for your mail. I appreciate your advice and inputs. I shall share these with Anand, and I hope you enjoy your life of moderate drinking and merrymaking, not too much. Then Tanvi has written, hi y'all. So I'm guessing Tanvi is a millennial. Just a quick word to say that while I appreciate the variant opinion on NL regulars, I do think Anand can sometimes be extremely dismissive and rude, especially towards Manisha. One doesn't have to wander too far to discover why that is. While I have my opinions on the value or necessity of a conservative voice, you all know best what you want from your platform. However, since your entire debate rests on civil discussion, it might be worth your time to check your colleague. You do not have to read this email out loud, since my intent is not to embarrass anyone. Too late, Tanvi, I already read out loud. But sure, I agree we should be polite to each other. Although I'm not sure I'm always polite, but yes, it is something worth aspiring for. Now, I have emails, lots more, and I'll tell you who all have written these mails. Gurpreet, you have written a 580 word mail. It is exceeding the word limit. He says, I forgive my verbosity. He has a complaint that our sports podcast was discontinued. Well, we will probably be starting another, but not immediately. I think, Aditya, you're already in talks with someone. There are 2 subscribers who, as soon as we finish Media Rumble, and they are subscribers who wrote in and said, we'll do your sports podcast. So we'll probably collaborate with them and start that. And then there are so many other mails. There's one by Animesh Sharma, who has said wonderful things, and thank you so much for that. There's Abhishek Sawant. Hello team, kudos to the concept of paying to keep news free. There is Rujuta Deshpande, a software engineer, and she's been a subscriber for 4 years. And you have given some suggestions that we should have some more pro-BJP voices, because all of us seem to anti-BJP, and you have given some advice, some suggestions like, say, Shadari Chari, Geeta Bhatt, Advocate Kohli. Like I said, we want, journalists on this panel. We have other shows and interviews with party spokespersons, but we shall try to find more right-wing voices. And she says, please get Madhu back once in a while. We will, Rujuta, Pakka. Madhu is very seriously quarantining herself these days, but we will get her back. And Manoj Durairaj has written that, thank you, you're doing a great job in creating wonderful content on NL. I'm writing this after reading that Umar Khalid was arrested. I've always felt threatened with this present regime, but haven't felt this low. I would like to ask the panel, what is in store for the country? Where are we progressing? I read a book on the Rwanda genocide, and the present situation looks very much like we are inching towards that. Call me pessimistic, but the way minorities are treated doesn't look promising. The entire setup is so reminiscent of the Rwandan radio, who made constant effort to spread hatred against the Tutsi tribe. The way the INB ministry allowed Sudarshan TV to go ahead with the UPSC Jihad show, and the way our media is trying hard with every single incident to target the minorities. Do you think we are seeing a Rwandan radio kind of setup here? Or do you think we are a much more mature society? Also, I was a regular consumer of Newslaundry, and bam, the mobile disappeared. Well, the app disappeared actually 2 years ago. We had taken it down because we weren't being able to keep up technologically. But as soon as our new website is up, the app will also be up shortly after that. I will be telling you more about that. But Manoj, my view is, and I've written this, I think, and I've articulated this in a few haftas, I think we are, as far as the media role is concerned, already at the point where Rwanda radio was. We are not very far from that. Whether we move beyond that, I hate to say this, but we'll have to wait and see. I hope we don't. But no, as a society, I won't say we are more mature than the Rwandan society was. The kind of things that get a free pass are shocking. And I agree with you. It's a very worrying time for all of us, especially in the news media, because what our colleagues and former friends are doing, I'm shocked and amazed that such stuff can still happen. But on that note, I'd like to ask Revati for her recommendations and thank her for taking the time. Rev, you've done very brave work all your life, and you still continue to. Stay safe, work safely there in UP.
Yesterday, one journalist was beaten up near Shamli.
Who was that, Rev?
I don't know who was beaten up near Shamli. Not near Shamli, one of the other districts.
I think it was Shamli district. UP, this News 18.
News 18 journalist. For what? For it was on.
I don't know. The reason is not still clear.
Still not clear. I see.
There was a video about it.
Unsurprising. Gross ka mamla hai yahan to. But the way I'm keeping safe is to eat very good food. I'm living in an area which is full of the best kebabs and biryani and halim. My landlord is a biryani maker, so I'm in Lala land. That's my best protection against COVID, toxic politics, everything. Food. And my recommendation is a book by the historian Richard Eaton called India in the Persianate Age. It is an antidote to everything that is being spun about medieval India, because what Richard Eaton says is that you cannot look at the period between 800 AD and 1650 or 1700 AD as a Muslim period. You have to look at it as a Persianate culture intersecting with the Sanskritic culture. The Persianate culture harks back to a cosmopolitan Persian culture that included under it many different religions, even in Persia, where it came to India from. And the Sanskritic culture also included within it many different religions, not just Hinduism, and many animistic forms of worship. So the intersection of these two produced a very fluid, constantly back and forth kind of thing. And in his introductory chapter, he says, the year that what we know as the destruction of the Somnath temple, a Chola king went northwards and attacked a temple in Orissa and destroyed much more. However, we only know the Somnath story because we're projecting our present politics backwards. And that tells you the story of what we're doing wrong and what needs to be righted. And this book is an absolutely fantastic journey through everything we know, from how the Rajputs acquired power to what happened to tribals, to the Premakhyas and Sanskrit texts which were given great play and fostered by Persian courts, by Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan. So it's very important if we want to understand why Agra is not about Shivaji, for instance, and why our 12,000-year history is not what the Sangh is trying to project it for, the Ministry of Culture that they're trying to do now, then Richard Eaton is your answer.
Thank you for that recommendation. And Raman, so you said that's Saharanpur. That case was Saharanpur. So
Yes.
Shamli is near Shamli, I think.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
an hour away.
So anyway, Rave, you take care. Thank you for your time.
You guys do the same. Newslaundry is also at the forefront of all of this. I will log into the media rumble.
Okay, look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Right, so what is your recommendation for this Hafta?
There's a documentary on the Netflix, The Social Dilemma. This is, if you really want to know how technology accentuates, all the vices that we have today, the polarization, the hatred. So I think this is the must watch.
Okay. And my recommendation for the week is actually, one is this podcast from my favorite podcast channel called Planet Money. It's called Wasteland. And it was a real eye-opener. And I'm shocked that it had to take 2020 for that eye-opener. That basically what it says is that recycling of plastic is a myth. Plastic cannot be recycled in any viable way. So it's not being recycled.
Oh.
Not even 10% of the plastic is being recycled. And this green triangle that you see on plastics that you use was just a marketing gimmick put out by the plastic and the petroleum lobby. And it is such a fascinating listen that even now, the way to end plastic pollution is to stop using plastic, because recycling is still not viable. And they're saying it will probably never be viable. So you have to find a replacement. And can you imagine all this time? I assume that plastic is recycled, can be recycled. They're saying, no, it's not, just a fraction of it is. But by and large, no. That was one. And the second is Harsh Mandar's piece in the Indian Express. I think it's a must read and an important read, because I have never been so worried on basic civil liberties and rights in India as I am now. And I don't think now it's paranoia or overreaction. I think what we are seeing around us, it could be anyone next.
It could be
anyone. And on that note, I'd like to again recommend the Media Rumble. By the time this podcast is out, 2 days of the Media Rumble will already have passed, but you still have Saturday and Sunday. So I would recommend many sessions, and the ones that you couldn't attend live and could not log into and ask questions, they're all up on the Media Rumble website. Do check out the Media Rumble website. Do check out the Media Rumble YouTube page. We have some fantastic conversations, and hopefully next year, the Media Rumble will be back as a physical event. And really, I hope the social distancing thing just goes, man. You cannot live life socially distancing yourself. On that note, enjoy your weekend, and I leave you with this song, which I hope will make you think.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me, stand by me.
All the Newslaundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to Newslaundry help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel.